you start by just telling us your story, how you lost the right to vote and now what you're doing about it?
Well, Amy, thank you for having me on today. Back in 2005, I found myself standing in front of railroad tracks in South Florida. At the time, I was homeless, unemployed, recently released from prison, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I see no hope. I didn't have a future, or so I thought. And I was waiting on the train to come so I can jump in front of it and end my life. Fortunately, the train did not come, and I crossed those tracks, and I checked myself into a rehabilitation treatment program, and after graduating from there, I went to a homeless shelter. And while living at that homeless shelter, I enrolled at one of the local colleges there, Miami-Dade College, and I enrolled into the paralegal program. And after successfully completing that program, I continued on, and I received my bachelor's. And today, I am now 3 months away from graduating from law school at Florida International University College of Law.
Congratulations. Will you be able to practice law in Florida?
That's a real great question, Amy, because typically when I tell my story, there's a round of applause afterwards, but unfortunately, my story does not have a happy ending. Because in spite of the many obstacles that I've been able to overcome in life, even making the dean's list last year, I still would not be able to even sit for the bar once I graduate in May.
Desmond Meade, could you explain what exactly it means to be disenfranchised in Florida? What are all of the different things that you're prohibited from doing?
Well, in Florida, when a person is disenfranchised, they're basically stripped of their citizenship for life. So say, for instance, in my case, I'm unable to buy a home for my wife and kids anywhere I choose to buy a home. I'm restricted in employment opportunities. Of course, I cannot vote. I cannot serve on a jury, which was recently highlighted in the Zimmerman trial. And I'm basically ostracized and forced to wear a scarlet letter of shame for the rest of my life.
Desmond Meade, why are the laws so restrictive in Florida, and what is the process for formerly incarcerated people to reclaim their rights? I mean, is it at all possible, and what does it entail?
Well, the laws are still restrictive in Florida because our current administration refuses to let go of these Jim Crow laws. There have been positions stated concerning whether or not it's a political ploy. I think it's more than just that. I would challenge people to really start investigating what type of connection private prisons have to the people who are making a lot of our criminal justice policies. So presently in the state of Florida, an individual would have to wait 5 or 7 years before they're able to even apply to have their civil rights restored. But even after applying, the processing time for the application takes upwards of 6 years. So in reality, an individual will have to wait anywhere between 11 to 13 years just to see if they have a chance, a shot at getting their rights restored. Because in that time frame, just having a traffic ticket is enough to disqualify them.
And Desmond Meade, does that apply to all felons or just to violent felons?
You would think that a policy so restrictive would only apply to violent felons, but in the state of Florida, it applies to everyone, even that individual that may have released hot air balloons in the air, or an individual who may have gotten caught driving with a suspended license, or catching a lobster whose tail is too short, or even disturbing turtle nesting eggs, or burning a tire in public. Everyone falls under these policies, and everyone is stripped of that one endearing quality of being an American, and that's the right to vote, the right to have your voice heard.
This is extremely significant. I mean, in places like Vermont and Maine, state prisoners can vote from jail. You can never vote for the rest of your life, even out of jail. So what is the significance of Eric Holder's speech urging states to repeal laws that prohibit felons from voting? Can you talk about what this will mean?
Well, I think one of the main significance of the Attorney General's speech was really to heighten awareness of the policies that are currently in place that serve no legitimate purpose whatsoever. And I would even go as far as to say that those individuals that are advocating for these type of disfranchisement policies are acting in an irresponsible manner and contrary to public safety and to the goodwill of the people.
And Desmond Meade, why are African Americans so disproportionately impacted? What is the connection, if any, to the war on drugs?
Well, I think Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, really laid it out so it could be clear to everyone about how there's a disproportionate amount of police activity in the African American community. And as a result of this activity, you find that a great amount of African Americans are being arrested and incarcerated, which gives a skewed vision of drug use in the United States. So while African Americans might really represent a small minority of drug users, they represent the majority of individuals who are incarcerated due to drug use.
Senator Rand Paul also gave a speech yesterday that he's calling the Civil Rights Voting Restoration Act that would apply to federal elections, voting in federal elections, he said during a speech at the Law Center. Can you talk about the significance of this?
Well, I think that it would really having a federal legislation that would allow returning citizens to participate in federal elections would pressure some states to change their policies, particularly in Florida, because one of the main reasons is that there would be some kind of hardship there, because how would they administer elections by allowing a returning citizen to only vote for federal candidates and then restricting them from voting for state candidates? So I think that would force them to really revamp their system. But I'm not relying, and we're not relying on this current administration. They appear to have dug in their heels and have refused to even engage in dialogue with our lawmakers or even with our clergy in the state of Florida. So it's very evident to us that they have no intentions of walking away or moving away from this Jim Crow type policy.
And Desmond Meade, you've stressed repeatedly that it's important that people recognize that this is a bipartisan issue. Could you explain why you think that's important?
Well, I think that, there's a select few that would profit from these policies being in place in Florida because it contributes to the recidivism rate. And one of the tactics that they would probably use is saying that, and we've heard the Attorney General even mention that research has showed that the majority of people who are impacted by these policies tend to vote for the Democratic Party. However, what I can tell you in Florida is that there are Republicans who are disfranchised. And when the policy changes were made in Florida, which allowed nonviolent offenders to have their rights restored automatically, it was a Republican, well, it was Governor Charlie Crist, who was a Republican at the time. Virginia, their governor and Attorney General were Republican when they recently made the changes. And we know what's going on in Kentucky. So this issue transcends political lines. It's about humanity. It's the all-American issue. It's not about Democrat or Republican. It's about the common decency of letting an individual or helping an individual to reintegrate back into their community so they can become productive citizens and enjoy life.
And of course, if you can't vote, then how are you represented? It goes to the issue of politicians deciding where funds go, deciding policy. When a whole group, when a community does not voting, they're not represented, Desmond Meade.
And you are 100% correct. So as a result of these policies, not only have the African American and Latino communities' voice, their political voice, have been weakened on a daily basis, but as you've seen in the Zimmerman trial, you know, that it also affects the ability of African Americans and Latinos to be properly represented in the court of law.